Ahoy! The Musket received a ton of changes on the PTR that originally seemed intended to be nerfs. Unfortunately, something may have gone very wrong with that, and currently it looks like the Musket may actually end up getting buffs to its damage. This does not seem to be in line with the ideas the devs had for the Musket. In the recent dev talks, it didn't sound like they were planning to buff the Musket, and the patch notes themselves didn't make it sound like that either, so I am thinking that this is likely a mistake and an oversight. But that's exactly what the test server is for, to find things like that before they can make it to the live client. As such, I'm absolutely not trying to point fingers with this video. These are things that can simply happen in a test environment, but rather I want to make sure that people are aware of this, that this gets reported plenty, and that this gets fixed, or changed at least, before the change hits live client. This is especially important because along with the damage changes, there are also other changes to things that the Musket makes good use of, which also benefit the Musket in the new patch. So what is actually happening with the damage? XR figured out on PTR that something seemed a little bit off and it needed further investigation, so we went and shot each other in crafting clothes with no armor on them, no decks, nothing, many times just to get the baseline set. XR had already tracked the damage values from the live client, which you can see right here. This is the damage from the Musket across range. You can see the range values on the left side, and this is with no passive, no hit your mark, nothing like that, just the raw Musket damage. It starts at 714 damage, and until 50 meters range there is no drop off to the damage at all. After that it gradually starts dropping off. If you reach 100 meters you're dealing 73.25% of the damage. And if you go all the way to 125 meters where people basically stop rendering, then the damage that is left is 61%, so a fair bit of drop off. So we tested the same thing again on the PTR, and as you can see here, the visual overall looks pretty similar. The color in terms of percentage doesn't really change all too much. The values are slightly different though. At 100 meters our damage is now a rounded 76%, and at 125 meters we're dealing 63% of our damage still. So a slightly reduced drop off, nothing all too dramatic or meta changing in itself. However, along with that, two Musket passives got changed too. The first one is Ballistic Advantage. We didn't separately have to test this one because on the current patch that would simply look like this. You would always deal 714 damage because there is no damage drop off, so you're dealing 100% of the damage. This is without any other passives by the way, this is just Ballistic Advantage. On the PTR version, this drop off is changed so that the damage falloff from Musket shots beyond 50 meters is reduced by 50%. So the damage drop off still exists, it's just less. And this is what we can see here. At 100 meters, instead of dealing 76% of the damage, we now deal 88% of the damage. At 125 meters, instead of dealing 63% of the damage, we're now dealing 82%. So the falloff still exists to a lesser extent, but comparing that to the live client version, where we don't have any falloff at all, this would obviously still be a nerf by itself. And that is when we get into the real spicy territory, because we also have to factor in the hit your mark passive, which was also changed. On live, hit your mark increases your headshot and critical hit damage the further the target is away from the player, with a maximum increase of 15% at or beyond 100 meters away. So let's look at a fully decked out build that XR tested on the live client with both the Ballistic Advantage and hit your mark passive, which also means we're assuming a headshot or a crit here because otherwise you're not going to get the hit your mark passive. At point blank we're starting at 100% damage, and then because of Ballistic Advantage our damage can never go down, it only goes up. At the max range effect of 100 meter and all the way up to 125 meters, we're now dealing 113% weapon damage. So this is what you're currently dealing with if you're getting pelted by very skilled snipers in OPR. On the test server, this passive was also changed. Now it affects all shots, not just your crits and headshots. But let's look at the crits first so we can directly compare it to the current crits. These are our new tested values for the crits. What you can see is that at point blank we're once again starting off at 100% of the damage, and then it starts ramping up due to hit your mark factoring in and there being no damage drop off at all until 50 meters. We can see the damage consistently being increased here until around 65-ish meters, where it starts to drop off compared to the live version. That said, even at its lowest point of 125 meters, we're still dealing 91.75% of the weapon damage, which is still almost the full weapon damage when you think about it. But still, compared to the live version, at very far away ranges, we would lose around 21% damage, so it would be a nerf. But here's the thing, look at how far away 100 meters actually is in New World. This is not a range where many headshots will be landed, this is a range where muskets will go for body shots. So we need to talk about exactly those body shots, and that was our last and most important test. We tested the body shot damage we would deal with both Ballistic Advantage as well as Hit Your Mark active on the test server. And the color pattern should look familiar here because it is the same one that we had on the crit version of this. You can see that the damage initially goes up because now Hit Your Mark affects all of our body shots. And I'm gonna give you this graph again as a reminder how the damage currently looks like. You're not gonna get more than 100 damage right now unless you're landing a headshot. On the PTR, you're dealing 106% damage at 50 meters, 105% at 60 meters, 103 or 104% rather at 70 meters, and 102% at 80 meters. It is only at 95 meters that you actually start to drop below 100% of your damage. And even at that point, it stays negligible until you're basically getting to no more render distance. Looking at 115 meters, we're seeing a 5% drop off. So really not worth talking about. At almost all distances, in almost all fights, whenever you're going for body shots, the musket will deal more damage on the test server than it currently does. So in itself, this will maybe be a minor nerf to people who consistently hit headshots all the time, but for everyone else, this is already a buff. But wait, there is more. Currently, Hit Your Mark is a crit damage modifier, which is strong, but not the strongest option that we have. On the new patch, Hit Your Mark will be a base damage modifier. That means not only does it interact slightly differently with things like empowers, for example, but also it'll affect other effects. XR said that if working as intended, it should affect Runeglass gem bleeds, keenly jagged bleeds, as well as attunement damage. And now take a guess which three things muskets usually like to run for extra damage. Exactly, all of those. This means that the most frustrating to deal with musket players at the moment, the ones that have best in slot muskets, will be even harder to deal with because they benefit from all of these effects. As such, the percentages that I've shown you won't even reflect the full reality and will just be a fraction of the total damage increase that we're seeing, especially again on body shots. Most musket players also run int gems and at least 150 int, which interacts with the drop-off a little bit differently too. Mixed Nuts has done some further calculations to account for this, to see what the damage would be like with a Runeglass int gem and some int in your spec. The graph for crits or headshots is this one. BA is Ballistic Advantage and HYM is Hit Your Mark. Here we can see that again, the life damage with a crit with Ballistic Advantage and Hit Your Mark is a little bit higher at longer distances, while on the PTR version it starts to drop off eventually. But if we look at non-crits, then we see a very, very different picture, where the new PTR version just consistently outdamages everything until pretty much 100 meters. And again, that doesn't even include keenly jagged or attunement yet. Keep in mind, the musket was buffed in other ways as well, which I think were actually intended to compensate for the intended nerf, so you can now move while throwing your sticky bomb or loading up your power shot or powder burn. So overall, the musket passive and drop-off changes on the PTR probably need some more looking into. There's also another concern with the musket on the new patch. Before I tell you that, a quick reminder, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell if this type of content interests you. I have more PTR stuff and changes that I definitely will talk about, as well as weapon mechanics in the next days. So the other concern relates to the hard runes. Keenly jagged and Runeglass bleeds will stack hard runes in the next patch, which means, again, with a musket build that uses both of these things most of the time, you will get stacks on your hard rune very, very quickly. And that comes with the concern of Bile Bomb, which musket users can absolutely use because it is a long-range projectile, being used aggressively and then kind of used to lock you down as you are trying to move towards the musket user. And if they can stack that very frequently, that would absolutely hurt because you are exhausted, you are slowed, and you're constantly going to get hit by the musket. If you want to learn more about the new hard rune and its interactions, I will link a video for you right here that you can check out. Also, Mixed Nuts thread discusses a lot of the musket changes more deeply, so if you're interested in a lot of in-depth numbers, then feel free to check that out. I will link that down below in the description. Thanks to XR, Mixed Nuts, and also Kuratius, who helped out Mixed Nuts a little bit for the testing, and thank you for watching. Geeksloth out.